The visage of my mother eludes me. She passed away when I was 2 years old, and all we have are Dad's memories and a few photos to help us remember her. Hi, I'm Cassandra, and I'm here to tell you the tale of how I discovered that the truth can be your greatest defense against deceit. I became accustomed to solitude as a child living in the home of a politician. Even though our mansion had 6 bedrooms, I often felt as if I were a marble in a vacuum, rattling about in there by myself. After Mom passed away, Dad dove headfirst into his job. He vanished without a trace for an entire 2 years. Although he was still physically present with us, emotionally he seemed to have departed to a distant planet. Cassandra, your dad is going to give a speech tonight, my nanny Sarah would announce as she turned on the television. See, there he is. I would reach out and touch his face by pressing my small hands against the screen. Back then, I usually saw Dad doing that, speaking to large groups of people instead of me, via a glass barrier. Great-Grandma Rose is a blessing. Almost daily she would drop by, bearing her renowned chocolate chip cookies and tales of my dad's youth. Everything shifted when I was 6 years old. I hadn't seen my dad in years, but when he returned home one evening, he appeared much younger. "Cassandra, honey, I want you to meet someone special," stated the man. That is how Patricia became a part of our family. My stepmother-in-law was towering over me, always primped and shining, and her well-rehearsed grin never quite reached her eyes. In my Pokemon pajamas, I stood there, gazing up at her, and I felt odd. It wasn't too horrible in the beginning. I didn't mind that Patricia paid me little attention. Whatever the case may be, I had my own section of the house, complete with a bedroom, bathroom, and study space where I completed my assignments. Thanks to Grandma Rose and Sarah, who remained my nanny, I had very little contact with Patricia. However, I began to perceive details. The moment Dad walked out of the room, Patricia's smile would disappear. For example, she would accidentally plan her posh lunches on the same day as my piano recitals, forcing my dad to pick one over the other. Her events were always chosen by him. After all, I couldn't let down the wife of a prominent political figure. The words, "Don't take it personally, sweetie," would come from Grandma Rose on many occasions. "Your dad's really preoccupied. Going around campaign stops is no picnic." I made an effort to refrain from doing so. I did, in fact. But when you skip dinner with your dad in favor of monitoring his job updates on YouTube, it's impossible to keep from taking it personally. The moment your perfect grades take a back seat to your stepmother's shopping sprees. That all changed when I was in high school, probably because his advisors informed him that voters were very interested in education. Dad began to speak more about my future. Whatever the case may be, I had no intention of grumbling. His genuine interest in my life returned after a long absence. "Yale, Harvard, Stanford, take your pick, Kimmy," he joked one night while pleasantly surprising me by coming home for supper instead of out. "Any of them could accept you with your current GPA. I'll take care of all of your expenses, including housing and tuition." My pasta almost suffocated me. There was a crash as Patricia's fork hit her plate. The next year, I turned 16. A shiny new Mercedes, adorned with a huge red ribbon, was waiting for me when I stepped outside that morning. Standing there with a childlike look on his face was Dad. While holding the keys out to me, he shouted, "Happy birthday, sweetheart. Think you can handle it?" I may have creased his $1,000 suit with my screams and hugs. Just for a second, it seemed as if I were back with my dad from before Mom passed away and politics consumed his life. The sound of Patricia's voice sliced through the air like ice. "Richard, is that a real Mercedes? As a 16-year-old? The way Dad described the car's specs made me feel like she was staring at me from behind. I overheard their argument in their bedroom later that night. Patricia's voice echoed across the room, criticizing the way you're molding her into privileged, entitled rich kids, the very type of people the opposition claims we represent. What's next? A private jet for graduation. Patricia, she is my daughter, Dad said. I've missed too many birthdays already. What will it look like when she ties the vehicle to a tree? Additionally, when her pampered pals introduce her to narcotics. After then, did you give any consideration to your campaign? Save me from myself was Patricia's job thereafter. Whenever Dad brought up the subject of college, she would reference an article about spoiled brats having a blast in college. She questioned every cent I spent on school supplies. Cassandra, my darling, in that saccharine accent she used when her country club friends were over, do tell everyone about that C good in chemistry, she would instruct. This is particularly unfortunate given the abundance of resources that your father offers. At the same time, her personal credit card expenditures were through the roof. Whenever Richard was gone, she would complain to her dad, I'm so lonely. Dad would listen. Shopping is my only comfort. An additional $5,000 purse. One more spa getaway. Yet another project for remodeling. Avoiding it was my best effort. I did, in fact. Yet Patricia was adamant that I not. She would exclaim, your father works so hard, whenever her friends came to visit. And some people just take without any gratitude. As she said it, she would stare directly at me. At last, I lost it one day. It happened at a lunch party she hosted. I finally snapped because she had been picking on me all afternoon. At least I'm not the one bleeding and dry with shopping sprees. I fired back. Silence fell over the room. The color reddened Patricia's cheeks. My dad summoned me to his study that night. Patricia tells me you embarrassed her in front of her friends today. He pointed out, you should make more of an effort, Cassandra. In her role as a mother to you, she is giving it her all. Screaming was on my mind. I simply nodded and retired to my room instead. Following that, I started to specter around my own home. I ate in my room most of the time, waiting for Patricia to leave the house before scavenging the kitchen. I redoubled my efforts in my studies, hell-bent on enrolling in a university distant from her. When my dad was home, I got to visit her once and we would act out our little family theater show. The arrival of winter break that year was absolutely anticipated. Surprisingly, Patricia gave her approval when I asked for it, so my friends and I could go snowboarding at Mountain Ridge Resort. As was his custom, Dad was on a campaign tour. The trip's funding is here, Patricia announced as she held up a stack of $100 bills. A narrow line formed on her lips. But keep in mind, Cassandra, don't brag. Nobody needs to hear about the spoilt daughter of the politician getting all worked up at a ski resort. The sky was a gorgeous crystal-clear blue the morning we departed, and the slopes were covered in fresh powder. The feeling of anticipation washed over me as we entered the parking lot at Mountain Ridge, a place I had been snowboarding at since I was 13 years old. I felt completely liberated on my first few runs, what with the wind blowing in my face and the snowflakes pelting my face. I felt at peace here. No political intrigue, no Patricia. There was only the mountain and I. Then witnessed it. The memory of that scene sometimes plays back in my mind. I was descending rapidly on my preferred path. It was a run I'd done dozens of times before. But for some reason, perhaps I leaped the gun. Perhaps I was moving at a dizzying pace. The world spun out of control in a flash. Sky, snow, sky, snow. The globe swirled. Over and over, I could feel my body crashing against the incline, sending me reeling and sliding. A sudden intense agony hit me, and then I was alone with my thoughts and the sound of distant cries for help. Don't move. At my side on one knee was another. The ski patrol is coming. I was in tremendous agony from the aching in my legs. Words like emergency transport and multiple fractures filtered through the fog. After they administered pain medication in the ambulance, I trembled and retrieved my phone. My dad would be the one to know. My dad would be a big boost. No response. This time I was determined. The same old story. Contacted Patricia in an increasingly desperate state. "What?" she asked with a sarcastic tone. "Patricia, something has gone wrong. It's an ambulance. I'm in it." "Indeed, there has," she said with an increasingly poisonous tone. "You foolish, intoxicated moron. I had a feeling you'd pull this stunt. Was stealing money not bad enough? Now you have to ruin your father's reputation with an intoxicated accident." "Oh, really? How? My consumption of alcohol was 0. What happened was that I simply fell. You little thief, save your falsehoods for someone else. Calling again is not worth your time." A dead end was reached. Tears were running down my face as I gazed at my phone in disbelief. Violating the law? Feeling tipsy? Why did she bring up the subject? "Assuringly, miss, we're almost at the hospital." The paramedic spoke lightly. "Is there someone else we can call for you?" I gave them Grandma Rose's number and nodded indifferently. With each pothole, my legs ached, but the ache in my chest was unbearable. A whirlwind of x-rays, physicians, and painkillers elapsed the hours. As I waited for Dad to return my call, I couldn't stop answering my phone. My mails must have reached him by now. He must have sensed my pain. Yet I did not receive a call. As a gesture of kindness, the nurses brought me additional blankets and Jell-O glasses. But I've never felt more abandoned than as night fell, and I lay alone in the sterile hospital room, listening to the beeping of equipment. As I opened my eyes, I could smell Grandma Rose's perfume and see the sunshine flowing in through the hospital window. Everything was fine for a little instant. Just then, her face was before me. Grandma Rose was older than I had ever seen her before. Instead of her customary cheerful smile, she appeared distressed and anxious. She would only act out her tendency to wring her hands under the most trying of circumstances. "Grandma, I'm worried about you. Would Dad be dropping by?" On the chair next to my bed, she sank down with a heavy sigh. "Oh, Cassandra," she started delicately. "I received a call from your dad yesterday night. Oh my goodness, he's furious, my darling. He claims you jeopardized his entire campaign." "Oh, really? How? In what ways?" "He says—" Her expression betrayed her pain as she hesitated to speak. "His story is that you and your pals were drinking on the mountain when you got into an argument and then passed out from alcohol poisoning. He also claims that you took money from the house. The impact was like a punch to the gut. No, that's not right. Truthfully, it's all false. All I was doing was snowboarding. There must be 100 occasions when I've done this before." "My darling, I am aware. I know," Grandma reassured me as she extended her hand to take mine. "However, your father has asked that you come live with me once you're free. He claims he is too disheartened to visit you at this moment." The room began to swirl. This is not possible. Even my dad mistook me for a drunk thief. Even at the hospital, he refused to visit me. "Now you know who I am, Grandma. I would never." "Of course I know, sweetheart." My hand was squeezed by her. "We will resolve this. We consistently do." Over the following several hours, I attempted to make sense of everything. The discomfort in my heart outweighed the anguish in my legs. I could always picture my proud and joyful father's face at my 16th birthday whenever I closed my eyes. Where had we gone wrong? Patricia entered the room as soon as the door swung open. Patricia put on a spectacular performance while a nurse checked my drip. "Oh, you poor dear," she whispered as she gently patted my hand. "This must be so difficult for you." In response to my stepmother's evident worry, the nurse grinned with approval. "She's fortunate to have such a supportive family," she remarked as she made some notes on my chart. Screaming was on my mind. I wanted to tell the nurse that my own father wouldn't come see me because of this woman, but I did nothing more than lie there and watch Patricia perform. When I heard the nurse's footsteps fading down the corridor, I knew it was time to get my phone. When it came to Patricia, I had long since learned to trust my instincts. I began to silently turn on the voice recorder, right on cue. Something hideous and victorious appeared on Patricia's face. As I struggled to move away, she sat on the edge of my bed, taking pleasure in my misery. "Oh, Cassandra," she said with an almost purring sound, "you have no idea how long I've waited for this moment. What are you talking about?" Instead of her customary mild titter, she let out a hard, nasty chuckle. "You are incredibly sluggish, aren't you? I will explain it to you in detail. The most wonderful daddy ever believes his darling daughter is a drunk and a thief." My voice became parched. You told him that." "I certainly did," she said with a scowl. "And the best part?" She drew nearer, and the scent of her pricey perfume made me sick to my stomach. "Every word was believed by him. That you were inebriated and fighting on that mountain before your little mishap, that you pilfered thousands of dollars from his safe. By the way, that money is sitting pretty nicely in my personal account. He'll never believe. He already has." She was now practically bragging. "Fancy universities won't be covered by your dad anymore. An end to the trust fund. Finishing the legacy. I've guaranteed that. As it should be, I will soon succeed to your estate as your only heir." A sense of confinement washed over me. "Why? Would you mind telling me why you're doing this?" "The reason being that you are blocking my path was from the beginning." She got to her feet and straightened her fashionable skirt. His precious little reminder of his first wife. An evil grin spread across her face as she cast her eyes down at me. "Now, though, all you are is the family's letdown. He would want to forget about his inebriated, disabled daughter." I was overcome with emotion. "I will improve. This is what the doctor recommended. Could you please?" Her hand was waved in a contemptuous manner. "If you ever walk normally again, you'll be lucky. As if it were relevant. You can say goodbye to that flashy vehicle of yours. I will relieve you of that responsibility. Why would a handicapped person need a Mercedes anyway?" She made her way to the door, paused, and then turned around, her smile sending shivers down my spine. "Deal with it, Cassandra. It's just the two of you now. Have no father, no money, and no future. Just the two of you, your beloved grandma, and you, fighting for survival. That is the place you should be." With her back to the door, it slammed locked. I released a breath that I had been suppressing unconsciously. I shook my head and fumbled for my phone to end the recording. With her poisonous comments immortalized in digital form, I listened to the tape. As I pondered how to proceed with this proof, my fingers lingered on the screen of my phone. I skipped out on going back to my parents' house after my hospital discharge. Although Grandma Rose's house was smaller than my father's estate, it provided a comforting atmosphere that our previous home lacked. Heartfelt warmth, not artificial, but the kind that radiates from a loving relationship. Recuperation was a total nightmare. The arduous process of learning to walk again, involving physical therapy 3 times a week and many exercises, is just the beginning. Whenever the agony became unbearable, Grandma Rose would reach out and grab my hand. She was also there to celebrate each small triumph. I immersed myself in my academics in between therapy appointments. With the help of my laptop, I was able to take classes online, complete homework, and even join study groups virtually. I was so determined that Patricia's prophecies about my future would not come true that I would log on even on the days when I could hardly muster the energy to get out of bed. Time for graduation finally arrived. The acceptance letters began to arrive. Yale, Columbia, Berkeley, and I had maintained my grades despite everything. All of them were ideal schools, but they were all out of reach. I called my dad's number, trembling with fear. A year had passed since the accident and his abandonment of me. Maybe now. Dad, not even I could hear my own voice. Cassandra, a politician's voice, cold and formal, depicted his tone. "I told you not to call." Listen, please. Yale accepted me. If a criminal and an alcoholic want to go to college, I won't pay for it. Never give this number another call. Press on. With the recording from the hospital gnawing at my pocket, I sat there with my phone. At that same moment, I could have played along with him and exposed Patricia's deceit. Yet I was halted in my tracks. Perhaps it was a combination of pride and the understanding that he didn't deserve the truth. After all, he was the type of father who could believe such lies so readily and leave his hurt daughter without ever speaking to her. I'll figure something else out, I informed Grandma that evening. That is exactly what I did. Starting off as a barista, I eventually worked my way up to evening hours at a bookshop. I learned to ignore the news whenever my dad's face showed up on TV, promoting his next major campaign. I ceased to be embarrassed whenever his name was brought up by clients and no longer cared when they spoke about what a wonderful family man he was. 3 years went by in the same way. Getting up, going to work, studying in the breaks, and saving all the money you can. To the best of her ability, Grandma Rose pitched in, even going so far as to try to sell some of her antique jewels. I would not let her to. You should be proud of yourself, she said to me one night as I tallied up my funds. Nearly halfway to my objective, I stood. I had the epiphany. She had longed for her father's attention, lived in that home, driven that Mercedes, but now she was no longer there. Someone more powerful stood in her stead, someone who wasn't looking to him for financial or social support. At the coffee shop, I was sweeping tables when my phone rang. A mysterious figure. Something compelled me to answer the call even though I usually let it go to voicemail. "Hello, Cassandra, my darling," that sweet voice whispered. "Patricia, please." The grip on the phone grew tighter in my hand. "What do you want now?" "Now, is that any way to talk to your loving stepmother?" I could still hear her imitating that chuckle. "Especially when I'm calling with such an opportunity for you." My legs felt weak, so I sat down. "I'm not interested in anything you have to offer." "I know, but I'll be expecting you. A new wave of support for your father's effort has begun. The wonderful idea came from his image team, highlighting the importance of family values. A number of interviews with you are being planned. It was nearly funny. You can't be serious. This is grave. As the cherished daughter reunited with her dedicated father and stepmother, you will extol Richard's virtues as a parent, including his boundless support and the tightness of our family bond. It will be devoured by the public." I was taken aback for a second by its sheer chutzpah. They expected me to play happy families after 3 years of silence, hardship, and starting over. "You're insane," I mustered up the courage to say afterwards. "Why would I ever help you?" Her tone became abrasive. "If you don't, any inheritance will be lost. Additionally, your father has the right to pursue legal action for the funds you embezzled. I am not guilty of stealing. You made off with that cash. To hell with your word and mine, my love. In your opinion, who can people trust? Whose daughter is this? The brilliant politician's wife or the unstable alcoholic?" I felt a sudden jolt of anger. What was the point of accepting her deceit and acting morally for so long? Go to hell, Patricia. Eventually, I ended the call. As I sat at my little desk in Grandma's house, my hands trembled. A low hum emanated from my laptop. The audio files, including Patricia's confession in the hospital room and this most recent conversation as well, were exactly where I had stored them throughout. Silence was my choice 3 years ago. I wanted to go my own way and start over. However, I had had enough. I logged onto all of my social media sites and began to type. What transpired really went unspoken for 3 years. I included everything: the audio recordings, screenshots of Patricia's menacing texts, etc. The post button was briefly occupied by my finger. Everything would shift if this happened. for the sake of not only Patricia and Dad, but also me. You can't turn around now. It was me who hit post. What I had begun, I could not have known. The post I made became viral within hours. It had spread overnight to every major news outlet, political blog, and social media platform. No matter what I did, reporters and TV producers kept calling my phone. Statements such, "This could really hurt your father's campaign," or "We'd love to have you share your story on our morning show," were common. "Want to weigh in?" I declined each one. The goal of retaliation had shifted. I wasn't satisfied as I expected to be watching his appalling numbers sink. To the contrary, it left me feeling empty. My phone rang precisely 1 week subsequent to the post. Phone number of my dad. His tone changed, and he asked, "Can we meet?" I'm exhausted. Being human. "Please." We decided to meet in a local, peaceful coffee shop, not the one where I worked. I was so surprised to see him when I went in. The politician in his immaculate suit was a thing of the past. On the other hand, I noticed a man whose shoulders dropped. His tie was loose, and he appeared as though he hadn't slept in days. "Cassandra," he proclaimed as he sprang out of his seat. I don't even know where to start. The beginning might be good, I remarked as I sat down. He inhaled deeply. I listened to the tapes, to a person. I've been replaying their words in my head, attempting to fathom how I could have been so oblivious. He sounded trembling. Throughout the years leading up to the accident, and even before then, I let you down. My profession in creating the ideal political persona consumed me to the point that I lost sight of what was truly important in life. His face was now betraying him as he cried out. My father had never cried before. His explanation was that Patricia had admitted everything. After your accident, she lied about your drinking, stole money, and exploited the situation. She came clean about her years-long efforts to tear us apart. Across the table, he stretched out and took both of my hands. "Can you ever forgive me?" Similarly, I began to cry. "Dad, I've missed you. A great deal." We rose to our feet and embraced in the center of the coffee shop. That embrace healed the wounds of 3 years of separation and anguish. I went ahead and filed for a divorce. He stated afterwards, "The legal team is taking care of it. Moreover, I would like to cover the cost of your university education. The least I can do is let you choose any school you like. Even now, I'll admit that Yale is my ideal school. Then Yale it is." Later that day, I published yet another piece. This time around, I spared no details, including Patricia's manipulation, and detailed how my father had taken responsibility of his actions and resolved to rectify the situation. Surprisingly, it was well received. There was no well-crafted campaign message that could have touched voters more than the narrative of a politician who put his daughter ahead of his reputation, admitted his mistakes, and sought to make apologies. After waiting 2 months, I settled into my Yale dorm. Like any good father would, Dad helped me carry the boxes up the stairs. As Grandma Rose made my bed with clean sheets, she sobbed joyfully. "Patricia, who is this?" Somewhere in Florida, she was reportedly surviving off her divorce settlement when I last heard from her. I consider writing her a thank you note every now and then. My father and I were able to mend our relationship because of her last power move. Most of the time, though, I reflect on the fact that mending isn't usually a solitary process. In order to make room for something greater to emerge, a public uprising may be necessary at times. You have to take things apart before you can put them back together again. How about I? I've decided to study politics in college. I realize it's ironic. Someone, though, ought to prove to the world that honesty and politics aren't inherently at odds with one another. How about that? After that, he was re-elected. As it turns out, genuine human connection is more valued than flawless appearances. The truth, they say, will liberate you. The thing they leave out is that sometimes the truth does much more. Sometimes it returns you to your roots.